information because it's a different way of thinking about things, and it's shockingly logical, and but it's also shocking that we've been misdirected away from this kind of thinking for so long.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's everybody's never-ending story. So, I mean, it's a journey that we got to go through. Many don't want to. Many try to avoid it, but they're still on the journey nonetheless. You know, so they can't avoid it.
Yeah,
they can't.
I mean, I think we're all. I mean, at least most, non-profit organisations or charities or, other social movements that are involved with social change, and obviously, one of the best that I can think of besides the Zeitgeist movement is the Venus Project. There's a couple of others that are starting to get onto the whole thing of we don't need money. We've got technology. We got science. We got sustainability. We got the compassion. We got the scientific understanding. So we can do it. Let's work towards it. I think it's something that's slowly starting to come up and have people advocating it, because I mean, the vast majority of people, when you propose to them the idea of a resource-based economy, like, say, for example, you don't go in with any criticism. Like, say, for example, if you're stood in line somewhere and you just, a little bit of chit-chat emerges between you and another person, and like, say, for example, they're complaining about how, why they're being kept waiting for so long. And you say something like, that wouldn't happen in a resource-based economy. Yeah. And, it can be just that. And sometimes that can just be let to sit. And then they go, And then it sort of sticks in, and hopefully later they'll be like, what's this resource-based? Go on to Google, resource-based economy, sometimes you could just mention to them that, if they say, well, what's that? It's a system where science and technology are used to help us, create the conditions where we can all have a good life and not have to need money anymore. And I bet the vast majority of people, when you say something like that to them, they say, well, it sounds nice, but da 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 da.
Yeah. One thing I think about when it comes to if I mention it to somebody, which is very hard to do where I'm at, especially with your own family when you've known them for years, and it's kind of like you kind of know what to expect, or at least if you try, it's kind of like with me, I get kind of like a feeling with like, is this even welcoming? Because most of my family, I don't know how true this would be. It's just because it's just from my perspective. Like, I feel like it's like they're set in their ways, and they're not open to listening about new things. And if I try to, some may like put me down or stuff like that. I'm not sure which of them it would be, but anyways, when I try to talk to people, what age range should I talk to? Which age range would be more receptive to this, or like what's more important? The people who are going to inherit this, this system that we're creating that's right now going to shit, or and show them the possibilities of going to a better system, or do I go to somebody who's older and it's most of the time like talking to a rock, ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, it's. I would say, the best answer is present this to everyone that you can, in a socially calibrated fashion. But I would say, children are probably amongst the most receptive, because they haven't been indoctrinated, or they haven't been indoctrinated anywhere near as much, because as you say, it's correct that they're set in their ways, because human beings are actually, paradoxically, we're creatures of habit. If we feel like we're comfortable, then we're not going to need to do anything to alter our environmental conditions. Like, so for example, if you're sat on the sofa and it's and you feel cozy, you're not about to either open a window or to put the heating on, because you think that you're comfortable. So your brain will not exert any more energy than is necessary to if you don't feel threatened. That's why it's an unfortunate truth that human beings, they have to be shaken a little to wake them up from some kind of stupor that we're in, because we're susceptible to short-term thinking and materialistic things. Just like the raven likes the shiny object, we can be conditioned in a similar way, and it's hard to sort of push through that barrier with someone who is older, because as we do get older, we do get even more ingrained in our thinking, because we've put more of an emotional investment behind what we have, and we've held ideas for longer. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily feel extremely bad about an idea that you've just encountered, and you just start thinking, oh yeah, that's actually a really good idea, and then you're exposed to contrary evidence, and you're like, oh, okay. that's basically the grief period for the resolution of that belief. It's like, oh, okay, that's it. So, but something that's more ingrained will have more. But it's a multifaceted thing, because the people who are older, yes, they're more set in their ways, but they're also more likely to be more socially or financially mobile, in the sense of, I don't know, producing the funding for a new innovation, or a self-sustaining project, or something. A kid is more likely to be receptive to it, but a kid can't finance anything.
Yeah.
So, we should go on to the topic now. So
actually, I was just about to transition into that.
Cool. Go ahead then.
Children. Speaking of children, I'd like to first start off with explaining how the way people are as they grow up, from children to like teens, young adult, and then adult, by using the 4 states of water. You have gas, you have liquid, which is both flowing and still, and then you have ice. There's your 4 states. Children are gas, so they can become any. You could put your hand through it through gas, and it goes into whatever way you made it move. So children are very malleable when it comes to information in their behavior and everything. Especially when it comes to violence, such as when you abuse them as a child, they are more likely to become violent later on, or be it extrovertly or introvertly. And then you got as teenage years, this is where they're starting to try and put into practice what they've learned, if they learned any skills for that particular area. And the most important part is social areas of the culture they're in. Then you got that's flowing water right there. The still water is somewhere within the early 20s to the late 20s. That's where they're now starting to become more set in their ways. So it's like going from really hot temperatures now going to cooler and cooler temperatures. So that's why you go from gas to liquid to ice. And the adults are ice. So it's really cool. They're really hunkered down in their cabins because it's so cold outside, and their states of mind are are still there, but inside you might have some liquid. So you got to like chip away at that stuff with information about real stuff and examples to really get them to take a look. You want to get into where the water is, and you want to get them to start thinking again outside of what they already know. Because I think most of the time, this is not a given thing, but I think that they don't think as much as they think they do. Well, I use the word think too much, but they don't try to do critical thinking outside of what they already understand at that point, because now it's really set. There are some people who grew up always taught to keep looking for new information and thinking about things and questioning, so therefore they gathered that throughout their whole life, and they keep doing that. Those are people who, even though they're set in ice when they're older, their function is getting new information. So it's not really that solid. It's like an ice floe for them. Whereas you got many people who haven't done much other than the set things of that culture. They're going to be solid ice. Yeah. They're going to be difficult. So with that, when you abuse somebody as a kid, they're going to have, or neglect being picked on. They're going to pick up certain responses to certain situations as they get older, and it can be very violent again. Again, it could be to themselves, to others, both. I mean, and it really depends on if they have outlets or not. You know, if they have an outlet, like somebody to talk to or a place to go to help them relax and stuff, it will reduce the chances of violence. But that doesn't mean it will completely stop it, because there's going to be a situation they're going to come across, and it's going to be violent. That could be violent, and they might have them resort to it. And it's going to be a knee-jerk reaction, especially for those who have been used to violence their whole life.
Yeah, I mean it's the introduction of violence into their reality, as it were. They look at the world for reference points as to how to navigate this world, and especially if it's an adult in their life that's perpetrating this violence, a child looks to the parent mainly as a protector and a provider, and they look up to them for feedback as to how to actually live this life, because they've survived to that age. Surely they're doing something right. And then you see that adult acting with violence, and the kid starts thinking, well, to get what I want, I need to be violent as well.
Or it's also like this too, because when you're, I'm not gonna, I'm summarizing what Gabor Mate quotes. Okay. As a child, you need that kind of care to be, they got to feel safe in order to learn things. Otherwise, it becomes a defensive reaction, and they're not learning anything. They're just now responding with defensive action against something that hurt them, be it psychologically or physically.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, as he stated, the first year and a half, you don't have physical memory. You only have emotional memory. Because at that point, your brain's already developed its limbic system, which deals with emotions. Everything from your amygdala, which deals with aggression, fear, and sexual behavior, which they go hand in hand.
Yeah, and it's the lower reptilian brain, right?
No, that's the limbic system. That's the mammalian brain.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, but it does reptilian, mammalian, and then
is reflex, is automatic functions, which is like your breathing, your body's normal function to keep it running. That's the reptilian brain. The mammalian brain deals with all the emotional stressors and behaviors, and then you have the I guess,
The prefrontal cortex?
yeah. The cortex, the way we have it developed is so advanced compared to other animals that we actually have more functions for a lot of things. So we actually are the more complex violent creatures, and we've actually come across things and do things in with a violent nature in more variation than any other species in history.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you could take every species combined, they all pretty much have similar. We have whole new levels of violence.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that's just popped into my mind is if you doubt the creativity of violence, then I dare you to watch all the Saw films and see how creative violence can get. But anyway, carrying
on. The other thing too is it's not always the case where children say that's how I have to be to survive. Sometimes they're doing things the opposite to survive because they think, oh crap, they're hurting me. What do I do to survive? You know, how do I not have this? A perfect example of something minor that parents don't think about, but is very powerful in a child's development. If you ever notice with a baby, and again, this goes back before you have the physical memory, which is the hippocampus, that allows you to store immediate memory at that moment, as far as the physical with the emotional. But a lot of children won't remember. Most children won't remember. I'm sorry. Every child before a year and a half old won't remember the physical reason, but they'll remember the emotional reason. Well, the stress emotionally about what happened, just not what it was. And if you ever pay attention to a baby, if they're looking away from their mother and the mother's trying to like comfort them, it's because something happened within that baby's period of time after birth that caused them to not have the emotional attachment they were looking for. So they don't want to have the attachment and then lose it again. It's too mentally stressful. And a lot of times that can contribute to some young child bad behavior, as some people call it, although there's no such thing as bad. It's just a lack of care that they were given at that moment in time. I mean, eventually you can stimulate, the child can be stimulated to where they don't behave violently or and become more emotionally connected again. But this is like a key point because many children who have had the care they needed, the attention, the love, love is a big thing.
Absolutely.
For a child. That, more likely than not, will help prevent a child from being violent growing up. And you won't have your serial killers, your rapists, and so on. And speaking of development, here I have a suggestion on how we can solve most, if not all, sexual crime.
Fantastic.
Nudism. It's nudism. Nudity.
Nudism.
No. People growing up naked, where they won't worry
nudism.
about how.
Sorry,
yes.
thought it was an L. It's like ludism.
Sorry, I've actually been studying Norwegian, so I'm kind of like got my stuff mixed up a bit. Sorry.
Oh, right.
But
interesting.
Yeah. But where was I? Nudism. If a child grows up, and everybody's nude all the time, and only wear clothes when they need to, which originally what clothes were for, only when need to, okay, they won't be into pornography. It's not interesting. They'll look at you at your face even if you're nude, because it's normal. It's not something like, ooh, taboo, and then when you see it, it's like, ooh, yes, that's fun.
Yeah, it's the reason why we don't, get so excited about, anything that bores us. If you're overexposed to something, then it just becomes like, natural. I mean, like someone who'd never seen a desk lamp before would
It's like
be
breathing.
having, I mean, they'd be having a fit right now being in my room, for, like seeing a desk lamp there. But I'm just like, yeah, it's a desk lamp. It's fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a pair of tits. Yeah, we see those every day.
In fact, there's a website on nudist resorts. I came across this by accident when I was going through the actual behavior stuff for this topic. I came across that and I was like, what does this have to do with this? And I looked into it. I'm like, oh, because there was one of the ladies who has the site, her son who they go to the resort on a regular basis. The child grows up in both the environment we live in now as well as a nudist environment. They have both understandings growing up, and it becomes normal. So when a friend of his was showing him a nude magazine, he's like, yeah, and they're nude. So what? I've seen it before. And the kid's like, what? They're naked. Are you serious? This is pretty cool. No, it's normal. But yeah, I mean, imagine if people grew up and you wouldn't be embarrassed if you happen to walk in on somebody and you don't know they're in the room changing, they'll be like, continue to undress and change the other clothes, irregardless. It's like, oh, hi, sorry, I didn't know you were here. Who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
But I mean, and I think I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say that it's a weird sort of like shame mechanism that is put on a society that makes us sort of like hide something that's completely natural. I mean, I was thinking the other day that about the particular that in Brighton, I think like every year they have a naked bike ride. And basically just like hundreds and hundreds of people, no clothes on. Well, clothes are optional, but most people just nothing on, and they're riding down. And then I saw a little thing of I'm not sure whether it was from like one of these events or another nudist bike event, but there was a woman completely naked talking to a policeman, and I think like they were saying something about indecent exposure. But the thing is, with indecent exposure, that is what it is. Indecent exposure. Like, so for example, flashing your genitalia to a group of kids. That's indecent exposure.
Well,
but the thing is, we're born naked. So does that mean as soon as we come out of the womb, someone has to slap clothes on us?
Yeah, right. Well, the other thing is, it's only indecent exposure if you're in a culture of people who always wear clothes. If you raise everybody nude, everybody's going to see each other's genitalia all the time. It's not going to be any problem. I mean, that's just the thing. So, but now I wonder how many people, now if anybody I know that watches this and becomes horrified at what I just said, don't look into it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's only indecent exposure when we're raised that's indecent exposure. No, that's taboo. It's not really taboo. I mean, are we the only species that has to wear clothes? I mean, other creatures are always naked, and they don't have clothes. They have fur, or depending on which, or if you have blubber or something. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that is considered clothes for the animal, but they're still naked because everything's exposed. I mean, is that so horrifying? I mean, if you see a pig walking around with giant testicles, I mean, is that going to be indecent exposure? As opposed to...
Put some underwear on that elephant. We're offended.
Yeah, I know, right? Put that giant pair of pants on their damn barbarians. Interestingly enough, speaking of clothes, okay, the reason why we had pants is because of Vikings and all the barbarian people. Originally, people wore togas because they weren't afraid about wearing loose clothing, and if anything's exposed, oh well. This is going back to like Roman and Greek times, where they wore togas, but when they came to the colder north, they had to wear stuff that was more keeping the warmth in, and eventually they adopted pants.
Yeah.
And you could see how clothes evolved. So, I mean, it's like, clothes were a thing that were meant to help deal with environment, not to keep us from being nude. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but a lot of religious history has to do with that. It had nothing to do with governments or anything. It's just over the time, it kind of got adopted into law because you had enough influence from religious institutions years before.
Yeah, I mean the very idea of original sin, that's probably one of the root causes of all the shame and dysfunction that's caused by making something natural a taboo, and as a result we have deviant behavior and sex crime and all that stuff, but I mean we can get into that later, but yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, you were saying?
Well, the next point I wanted to bring up is with religion. They were very violent in the past because, like we have the bankers today, religion were the bankers then, in the sense of they had the power, they had the control. And again, I'm not bashing anybody's religion. I'm just stating what has occurred over centuries. So for those of you listening, don't get upset.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's really we're talking about powerful people who also, who were basically wielding the tools of the most powerful, and the tools of the most powerful at that time was the church.
Yeah, and I think they had to be some of the most abusive people in history. If you really think about what they've done, telling their kids that they can't touch themselves or do this and that, they have to do that and that, and it's like the kid's all screwed up because he can't do what he wants. He can't discover anything, so he has to do everything he's told, and therefore that's where you get all kinds of crazy people back then. Even today, it's the same way. But this time, it doesn't have to be religion anymore. It can just be, it's now laws that are, of course, superficial, which really don't mean anything. It's just there to, if you believe the laws are real, then you won't, then you'll consider it as trying to break laws or stuff like that. But the laws don't stop anything. They're superficial.
Yeah, they're patches. They're patches, really.
Well, it's not, I like to say they're just our imagination. Because we made them up it's a psychological thing. If a law was real, then where's the object of what is a law? Where's the object called law? It's all nothing but in our heads, just like a lot of things. And as vague as that sounds, it's actually over years before we even had laws, there was something that you understood, which was going back to hunter-gatherer tribes, which were pretty damn peaceful. Okay? Although they may have had tough lives based on the environment, they still got everything they need, and they weren't like stressed and stuff, so they didn't have to make laws. The only thing they understood, you didn't pee or take a crap where you ate or slept. You didn't pee inside the river because that's where you get your food and stuff, although we know now it doesn't matter. It still helps the environment. But they had rules that they understood from the door. Okay? That weren't really rules, it's just something they agreed upon. As opposed to now you write something, say you can't do that. Back then they had an agreement with one another to not do something, as opposed to making people saying they can't do this and that like we have today. Major oppression, which is extremely violent in and of itself.
Yeah, it's I mean, and in that sense, we can't really have helped that sort of thing, because what else was there in our thinking back then that could have been better? That was really the solution we came up with at the time, and yes, I mean, it worked to a certain degree when you look at it a certain way. But it's what we had to do at that point, because we had to figure out some way of surviving.
Yeah, I'd have to say, this is touching on free will now.
Yeah.
And that's a very sketchy topic, because, if I'm going to, okay, I'll put it like this. If I'm going to question the status quo, religion, all the behavior we have, I'm going to challenge free will too, I'm going to question that too.
Yeah.
It's only fair.
Mm-hmm.
And after coming across neuroscience, endocrinology, all kinds of causality, cause and effect, look at cause and effect, where's the freedom?